Hi everyone, welcome back to the Relax and Craft YouTube channel. My name's Fleur and today we're going to learn how to make this really on-trend, beautiful pearl and chain necklace. So I've seen these all over the internet, in shops, in designer houses, everywhere, and it seems to be this beautiful half pearl and half chain design with a feature clasp at the front. So when it's worn, it looks, it's not exactly asymmetric, but it is literally half and half. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, if pearls aren't for you, you don't like pearls, you could use any beads that you have for this half and any chain that you want. It doesn't have to be this size and shape of pearl and this size of chain. It can be whatever you have in your stash. It is super easy to make, really easy. You don't have to pay those designer prices or the high street prices for one. You can make it yourself with probably what you've got in your stash, even if you've got two broken necklaces and you want to make them into one. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to make this and how to make it as well, so keep watching. So to get started with this tutorial, we're just going to look at what we're going to actually need to make it. So we're going to need our elements. So I've got my chain and my pearls and my clasp, which is just here. Other things that we need findings wise is 2 pieces of French wire. So these are like a little coil of wire. You can buy it in one long piece of French wire. If I just find you what it looks like, here's a piece here. So you can see it's like one long piece. The other name of this is gimp, so you may know it as gimp or French wire, but you're going to need just 2 small sections of that, about 1 centimetre each, and then you're going to need a jump ring to attach to your pearl side, because obviously the chain will go straight onto the clasp as it is, and then we're going to need some silk. So the silk that we're using is Griffin silk, and I love the Griffin silk because it has the needle already attached to it. So this needle is the same diameter as the silk, so you don't have to worry about putting the silk through your pearls twice. It literally will go through. If it goes onto the needle, it will go onto the silk. Now the card that we're using is a number 2 card because we're using the double knot technique or the Baroque knot technique, whichever one you know it as. And the number 2 at the top, that denotes the smallest pearl that you could potentially use with this silk, or the 0.5. So if you're more of a wire worker, or you know gauges of wire or gauges of material, then obviously that number is going to mean more to you than the top number. The top number for me, it's a little bit of a probably just like a reference. I have used pearls which are bigger than a 2mm, and the drill hole is a lot smaller, so it all depends on how they've been drilled, you know, and what kind of drilling technique they've used. So it's always handy to have different levels of the card, so different numbers of the card. So it's a number system, starts at 1, I think it goes to 13, or even it may even go to 16, which is like a 1.2mm, so a really thick silk you can get as well. But I'm using the double-stranded technique, so number 2 card, it means for me that I can put that through my pearls twice. So that's 2 meters on there. We won't use the whole 2 meters, so we've got lots left over for other projects. Something to cut our silk with, I love my Xuron scissors or thread cutters because they give you a really nice sharp cut which doesn't tend to fray as much. So I've got those. I'm going to need some glue. So I'm using Hypo Cement Glue. Because we're using silk, we can't use a glue like a super glue or anything like that because it's going to be too harsh for the glue and it will rot through the silk. It's too harsh for the silk, sorry, it'll rot through. So Hypo Cement is perfect for this, and it's got a precision applicator on it as well. If you are struggling to find this, you're in the UK, I do have some on my website. I will link it in the description below. And lastly, I always find a knotting awl is a really good tool to have handy, just in case you have a knot which is placed itself where you don't want it to place itself. A knotting awl is great because it helps you get those knots out. We don't need any knotting tools for the technique that we're using, but it is always handy to have one around. And again, if you don't have a knotting awl, I do have a bundle of knotting awl and knotting tweezers on the website. Again, look in the description and you'll be able to see what's available. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take our clasp. Now it depends, doesn't matter which clasp you're using. I've got this beautiful locket clasp that I bought from Cooks and Gold in the UK. It's a beautiful sterling silver clasp, really gorgeous. And I also got some paperclip chain, again from Cooks and Gold. This is a sterling silver paperclip chain, and it really is beautiful to go alongside these gorgeous stick pearls. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place that onto my lock so that I keep it nice and safe. So if you are using a clasp or something else like that at the end, then you're going to want to have put one end on the clasp so it's ready to go. And you can then see exactly where it's going to sort of like attach in and how it's going to attach in. So the clasp is always at the front, so it's always good to have a feature clasp with this kind of design. Let me just straighten that out. Now I've got roughly the same amount of pearls to chain. So you can see here it finishes roughly about the same amount, so I've got an equal amount. And what's so beautiful about this design is you've got one side which is the pearls and one side which is the sterling silver, so you've got that real juxtaposition with either side completely different but all brought together with the clasp. The clasp will always sit at the front. So like I say, feature clasps are going to really work very well for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clasp and the chain and place it to one side, and I'm going to take my silk. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to unwrap all of the silk off of the card. Now we only need double the amount of silk plus a little bit more for knotting for this technique, but what we can't do is say, oh, that's enough, and then cut that away, because this doesn't have a needle on it then and it's useless to you. So we need to go right to the very end of the card, and the top tip is to, in pencil or in the bag what it comes in, so when you get it in the bag, pop a little piece of paper in there, and just when you wrap what's left back on here, just say what you've already made with it, so you know how much roughly is left on that card of silk. So I've got all of my silk off, and then because it's silk, we just want to go through and we're just stretching that silk just a little bit, just to make sure that there's no abnormalities in the silk, that nothing's going to be cut or it's going to break on us. So I'm just going through, just stretching it. Now silk will naturally stretch over time. This necklace isn't going to be a really heavy one, so it shouldn't stretch straight away, but if you're doing a pure pearl knotted piece all the way around and they're heavy pearls, it will stretch. And depending on how many times you wear it, if you're wearing it all the time, it will stretch a lot quicker. Always store your pearls flat, never hang them up, because the weight of the pearls will stretch the silk as well. So always just keep that in mind when you're making your pearl pieces of jewellery. So what we want to do is we want to just place a knot in the end of our silk, just to stop any of our pearls falling off the end. So I'm just going to place a knot in there. Don't worry, this is going to get cut off. It's just to stop everything falling off. Okay, so we're going to start to place our pearls onto our silk. Now, the first pearl that's going to be next to your clasp is going to be the last pearl that we sort of like add on when we're just adding them onto the string. So if you've got a hero pearl, or a pearl that you love a lot and it's got beautiful luster to it and it's got a beautiful orient, then keep that one near the front, because that's going to be the one that's near the clasp. What we're going to do though is we're going to start with, we're going to miss the first one out, and we're going to start with the second one at the back of the necklace, and I'm just going to start to add these onto the silk. So just placing them on, and we're going to push them all the way down to the bottom of the silk, well, nearly to the bottom of the silk. So just placing them on in order. Like I say, if you have a specific order which your pearls are going in, then now's the time to sort that order out and add them how you want them to sit on the neckline. And just pop the next one in. So it's only half a necklace, so it's not going to take too long to place them all on. And then the last two. And this one is going to be the one that sits closest to the clasp. So we're just going to place that through. And then we're going to bring those all the way down to the bottom of the silk. And we're just going to leave a couple of inches of silk at the end of our necklace, so don't let them go right to the very end of the knot. We're just going to leave a couple of inches of silk there just for the knots. So I'm not going to knot the whole piece, I don't think. I think I'm going to just knot the very first and the very last pearl in place, because I don't want the knots to space out the pearls on here. I want them to be really nice and fluid and sitting next to each other, which is a little bit not what we do, it goes against what we do with pearls really. We put the knots in there to separate each pearl so they don't rub against each other, and also if the necklace broke you would only lose that one pearl. But because this is just like an occasion necklace that I'm going to be wearing, I think it's absolutely fine just to put one knot either side of the first and last pearl. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to place on one of my centimetre of French wire. So just take the needle and just place it onto the coil, and I'll lift this up in a second for you to see. Ooh. It may be easier to pick it up. It is very delicate, so I don't like picking it up as much because it can damage it when you pick it up, because it is such a fine little coil of wire. So as you can see, that's gone onto there now, and I'm going to take that down to where I want the first pearl to sit. Okay. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to add on my jump ring. Now this jump ring is what's going to attach into the clasp, so this is the other end of my clasp. And again, bring that down so it's sitting on top of the French wire next to the first pearl. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move this board out of the way so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm just going to place a mat underneath so you can see the colour, what I'm going to do with the silk, so you can see that a little bit easier now. Okay, now when you're working with silk, it's best to keep everything out of the way because it will get caught up on everything. So just make sure your workspace is nice and clear of like clutter. So again, making sure that I've got just that couple of inches left at the end. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go through the very first pearl. So I'm going back through the pearl towards the tail end. So just picking up the first pearl and just placing the needle through. Now just be very careful that this needle doesn't pierce through the side of the silk. We don't want to damage that silk, but you can see there, just zoom in just a little bit. So you can see the needle's coming out, and then what I want to do is I'm going to keep that pearl where I want it. I'm not going to let it go up the silk. I'm just keeping that pearl where I want it to be, and all I'm going to do is put my fingers over the top of that pearl, and I'm just bringing all this silk through, and just be careful at this point that it looks like it's going to knot up. We just want to do this nice and slowly. So so we don't get any knots. Like so. And you'll see that French wire goes down to the where it meets the top of the pearl. So this is what we have now. So I've got my piece of French wire here that you can see there, and the jump ring in a loop. Now I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. And what I want to do now is, as I pull the silk, what will happen is that little loop's going to get smaller that's there, and the French wire will curve around and create a barrier between the silk and the jump ring. Okay, so we want that little barrier there between the silk and the jump ring, so that the silk doesn't rub away onto the jump ring and wear through and break. So that is now created a little metal barrier between the two. And what we're going to do now is we're going to place in 2 overhand knots, which will be our baroque knots. So I've got the side with the pearls on them and the side with the needle on it. And what I'm going to do is just tie an overhand knot. So nothing difficult, just an overhand knot. So you can see there, got the little cross at the bottom, and as I bring that up, I'm going to pull it tight. So that's now knotted everything in place. Okay, so we can see the French wire is encapsulating the jump ring, and the first knot has pushed everything together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a second knot now, just to keep it in place. Now before we tighten the second knot, just make sure that that first knot is nice and tight, and then I'm going to pull that down so it's now sitting and it's completely knotted in place. Okay, so you can see there now that's completely knotted. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go through all of my pearls with my needle. So like I say, if I was going to knot in between them all, I would do that same knot every time I put my needle through a pearl and bring it through. If I wanted a knot between them all, I could then do another knot here, but I'm going to go through all of my pearls. I don't want a knot in between. So I'm just going to take the needle and just go through all of the pearls. And don't forget, we've got one pearl that we didn't add on, so that's going to be the very last pearl that we add in a second. So just take your time. Because it's only a number 2 card, the needle is obviously as thin as the silk, so sometimes the needle can become a little bit like bent, so we just need to make sure that it stays nice and straight. And if you need to, you can always cut a little bit at the end of the needle away, because you've got quite a long needle there. So I'm just going to go through these last few. So I've gone through all of my pearls. I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So I've gone through all of my pearls, so I've got no more pearls left to go through. But if you remember, right at the very beginning, we left one pearl off. So we're now going to take that pearl and we're going to place it onto the side with the needle on it. Okay, so let that go all the way through, and we're going to bring that down so it's now sitting, so you can see that you've got that loose pearl that you've just added. This is the tail end of my silk, and now what I need to do is I need to place on my next piece of my French wire. So taking the French wire and just going through and place that on. And then we need to bring back the chain. Now we're just going to go through the very end link, So take the needle now through the end link, so the link that's not attached to the clasp. Bring that through. And then we're going to go back through that loose pearl that we added on again. So taking the needle and taking that back through that pearl. Now we don't want a gap, so just keep that pearl nice and close. So I'm just bringing that all the way down, and then I'll show you how the French wire curls around. There we go. So I'm just holding that, oops, holding it in place, and then you can see the French wire is going to just, as I pull that down, the French wire is going to bend around and create the loop the same on the other side. So I'm just going to tighten everything up. So this is where we don't want too much of a gap between those last two pearls. But now what we have is we have the same situation as when we started. We've got two ends of cord. Okay, so I'm just going to move the pearls. Now just make sure that all your pearls bend nicely, that they're not too tight on that silk, but there's no gaps on the silk. Okay, and then what we're going to do exactly the same as before, just give it one final check, make sure that everything's sitting where we want it, and we're just going to tie, just zoom back out again, tie that overhand knot, and it's going to sit in between, if we look this way around, the first and second pearl, exactly the same as the knot before. So again, just give that a nice pull. Okay, so we can see that we've got a knot there, and we have a corresponding knot on the other side as well. So the very first, between the very first and second pearl is knotted, the rest aren't knotted. Okay, so we want to keep it just as a double knot, and then what we want to do is take in our glue. We're just going to pop a small dab of glue onto that knot, and I like to also just run the glue up the sides of the silk, because it's easier then to cut it. When you cut the silk, you won't have a fluffy halo of silk fibres, you'll have a nice clean cut. I'm just going to pop the end back on the glue. Okay, now we would let this glue dry for a good few hours, just to allow it to fully cure, because when we have a knot that's been glued, it's actually swollen the fibres up. So if we were to cut this straight away, what can happen is it can come unknotted. So we want it to completely dry, but just for the demo purposes, I'm just going to cut them a little bit shorter, just so your eye isn't looking at that. Now with the rest of your silk, just take your card and add that back onto your card. Like so, and then you can pop it back in its bag if you need to. And then what we want to do now is just open up the clasp, place on the jump ring, and there you've got your beautiful half and half necklace. So you can see there, that gorgeous necklace, which is very on trend. You see them quite a lot in designer shops and in the high street as well. Very, very simple to make. All you need is that little bit of chain for one half, your pearls for the other. You don't have to use this kind of chain or these stick pearls. You could have round pearls and a lovely Belcher Rolo chain or a Figaro chain, whatever you have. and then a gorgeous feature clasp. So thank you ever so much for watching this short tutorial on how to create this gorgeous necklace. If you have liked this tutorial, then please consider subscribing to the channel, hit the bell underneath and press all. That way YouTube will tell you whenever I drop a new tutorial or an unboxing or a tool review. Until next time, thank you ever so much, and I will see you soon.